automation is the key. It's the answer and probably the demise of the working class in America. AI looks intelligent to the outside world now, but
Yeah.
when you get behind the scenes,
Yeah.
it's chaining a bunch of services together. Artists, painters, those kind of individuals, inventors,
Yeah.
those visionaries. This is going to empower them.
Who's gonna lose out?
Your factory worker programmers.
You can go anywhere you want with this, but I'm gonna guess that AI is going to be an answer that you're going to give. Like, we're in 2025. So you want to get your thoughts on the current state of technology, around the world, in America. Like, just how are you viewing everything as it relates to software development, IT? What are the type of skills that we should really be honing in on? You know, what what do you think it will be like in the next few years?
That's
Um,
I used to feel like I had a good answer for that one. Every day it seems to change on the directions.
yeah,
Like all things, technology is a mixed bag. I used to be enthralled with it, thinking it was the greatest. It would save us all. Some days I think it's going to destroy us all. It's really a mixed bag based on how the world is going. We look at the challenges we face in a world.
yeah,
Um, we have integrated technology into everything, right?
yeah,
And how has that impacted our world? Well, it's made it really simple, right? We have a device you can pick up and call anyone around the world and communicate with anyone instantly.
yeah,
You can share your opinions, you can take notes, you can do anything, order things 2 days, have it shipped to your house, whatever you would like.
yeah,
That same technology has brought all of the competition we see in the world today. We're looking at rare earth metals. Everyone's looking for them all around the world and willing to go to war for them. So it's definitely good and bad.
yeah,
Putting a magnet in every single device from credit cards to you know the screens we're on now across the board, that has a consequence. There's a supply and demand and a consumption issue that's impacting us today. We look at the war in Ukraine.
yeah.
You know, the eastern side of Ukraine is full of rare earth metals.
Mhm.
Clearly, two nations wanted this. We wanted this in our deal with Ukraine.
Yeah,
Russia clearly wants it as well because they need them too.
yeah,
They're digging up half of Sweden right now for rare earths. We're looking at Greenland. So there's a lot of challenges to, having technology everywhere. Will AI help solve that? AI is definitely the most cutting edge here of what we're looking at and has the greatest potential. It also has the greatest potential for mistakes. Hallucinations in AI are just as common as right answers, unfortunately.
yeah,
Never in our time period or at least in my career, have I ever had the problem to where when a mistake is made, it isn't my fault. When I make a programming mistake, it's because I did 2 plus 2 and didn't get 4, right?
yeah,
Somewhere I messed up the math.
yeah,
With AI, it was modeled after the human neuron, so you're less likely to get wrong answers that are your fault. You're more likely to get hallucinations and output that is a result of a decision tree, a very complex decision tree happening to make a left turn instead of a right turn, and now you're down a rabbit hole that could plausibly be a good answer, but is not. That kind of challenge brings a lot to our technology. That's our big field in AI, androids, robotics, generally everything of automation, right? Automation is the key. It's the answer and probably the demise of the working class in America. Um, we can automate anything nowadays, but should we? And that's a big part of software. Something we started learning a long time ago with social media.
yeah,
Yes, we can build it. What's the social impact? What's the social impact of technology? That used to be a metric that Gartner gave out, was the social impact of technology. And I haven't seen that in a couple of years, but it's probably something as a society we'll have to start thinking about. As we're seeing the potential to build anything, and we're seeing with quantum tech, got quantum mechanics coming into it. You got the quantum world, the things that we're doing there.
yeah,
It isn't a matter of whether we can or we can't. Now it's a matter of should or should not, and that's what we're seeing, that shift in technology. Things that are having an impact. You could eliminate the entire U.S. labor force in 20 years with Android technology. I don't see that being a challenge for us. But should we as a society? Those are the challenges that really will challenge our leaders in the coming years because by the time we make a decision around that, as our society being a more capitalist society, of course we're going to go for big. We're going to do everything we can because that's what we do. It's what we've always traditionally done.
Yeah.
A lot of
Well,
times we haven't seen that impact for a few years, and that's probably what we're going to see. I think the impact will be the limiter of what we do in technology.
yeah. It's interesting, that you say that because, the last time I felt something like what we're going through with AI was probably, the internet boom. And reflecting on that, the internet boom is nothing close to what we're going
Yeah.
to see with this because the rate at which this thing can change the way we live,
Mhm.
the way we work.
Yeah.
Um, maybe talk a little bit about, what do you see for the future of people in IT who in some weird way is it's not weird way. We're
Yeah.
sort of ground zero on this,
Mhm.
but how is it going to change the job of a, a middle manager or a director in software technologies or an engineer? Like how does that change for us in the next five years? Like what should we be doing to stay relevant in the area of AI to make sure that hey, we still
Yeah.
are employable.
It's one of those things of know your enemy, keep them close. You've got to, sad as it is, I mean, we're building our replacement, and we know this. We're well aware of what we're building, and at some point that will come to a head. It's just a matter of time. The idea there is to have the social policies in place to kind of head that off. As a leader, when you're looking into this, you're going to have to be relevant. You can't write an email now without Copilot checking it for you.
That's-
It's everywhere. It's
yeah,
impossible as a
yeah,
leader. So
yeah,
there's a bar of perfection that we're putting on ourselves to expect everything to be perfect when it goes out. It's new in society now. In 3 years, perfect emails will just be the thing. So when you receive one that's human written, it's going to be weird. You're going to be like, what? Why did they? Why is it like that? I suspect it'll be a standardization unlike anything we've seen. We're going to be standardized in these tools, much like everything else we do. So I think as a leader, learning them is the only thing you can do. Embracing it,
face it.
it's, you got to lean into the wave. If you run from it, it's not going to change anything. You're just going to simply get under it faster.
Yeah,
It is a rising tide, and those people who are willing to put in the effort and the time to stay on top of it, I think they'll have a place at the table. You're always going to have a place at the table for those willing to put forward enough effort. The thing that's going to change with this is the amount of effort it takes to get to that table.
mm,
That bar is going to be raised because there will be fewer seats. You know, the one thing right now, yes, AI looks intelligent to the outside world now, but
yeah,
when you get behind the scenes,
yeah,
it's chaining a bunch of services together. We've had service architectures for years.
yeah,
This is, agentic chaining is just service calls. It's no different than a bunch of API calls. The only difference is your VM is now an LLM. You've got a model behind it that you're talking to three different distilled models with.
yeah,
It's no different than any other computer cluster we're working with now.
yeah.
The only thing is the programming language that is generating the response or the outcome is no longer a human written programming language. It is a trained brain with all of the fickleness of the human brain. So it puts those additional challenges come in there with us. You can hurt its feelings. Things like being polite to AI and having to do that. This
That's
is a new thing
hilarious.
for us. It's insane that it's like that, but
Yeah,
then it makes sense.
yeah,
We modeled it after the human brain. We taught it using the internet.
yeah.
We created this monster the way we did. We gave it not only all of our benefits, we also gave it all of our mistakes. And now we're slowly trying to peel those mistakes out and kind of slice them out like open heart surgery to remove some of the problems.
Yeah,
But we're not able to get them all. They're still going to be there because it's a very complex, system to learn everything.
yeah. What you said kind of reminded me back to our past conversations where we were arguing about, how, why are we building this thing with a web upload or whatever I was talking about, and I was like, oh blah, we should use a chatbot or LLM, and so it can be more open-minded and or open-ended, sorry. And and what I'm learning as I work through this stuff with you, it's like, when you actually peek behind the curtains, it's a Wizard of Oz type of effect here, right? To your
Yeah.
point, you said earlier, it's all the same stuff, just different names, and maybe it's a little bit better, but at the end of the day, you still need engineers who understand how everything works.
Hmm.
The only difference is that the barrier of entry may be a little bit lower because everything's a little more, how to say, automated, I guess the word I'm looking for.
It is. We work in GCP, so it's kind of all it's all provided for you. They've given you some guardrails, they've given you some bumpers and some safety nets.
Yeah.
If we were trying to do it all from scratch, it would have been a whole different story. It would have been much more complicated building out. We'd had some MCP protocols in there. It would have been no different than building any other web cluster for web application. It's exactly the same thing. Really, what I've learned from it and looking at it, at the end of the day, it's no different than any other reporting interface. It's a reporting interface.
Mhm.
It's no different than Crystal Reports or SAP or Tableau or any of your other reporting engines. You ask a question, it gives you back data. The format of that data is a little different. It's a little more palatable, but it really works no different than any other report. You're just interpreting it a little different, and it's a little more interactive,
Yeah,
right?
it's a little more interactive and it has a little more emotions than a
Yes,
typical
yes, it's an
computer.
interactive reporting engine at the day because you're just asking it questions and trying to make decisions around data most of the time.
Yeah.
It is one of the more useful tools I've ever seen. My own personal productivity has went through the roof. Architecture and design, understanding concepts, right? I can understand concepts in seconds. We were looking at GCP, we're looking at some of the tooling today around it on things I had never looked at. I can ask questions to it and I get an answer back. My problem is I'm assuming that answer is correct. And I'm trusting that answer around, the search technology was correct or whatever we're talking about. I'm not vetting that information. I'm using it as a precursor to get more information, but I'm taking it for granted that it's truthful. What happens when it's not? How do I know it's not? Those are the challenges. I understand it's getting 90% right, but that 10% that's wrong,
Yeah.
we'll never know it. It'll gloss right. It's no different than talking to a human.
Yeah. No,
When
I
you
get
talk to another human, we assume they're not BSing us. We
that.
assume that they're being truthful.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's kind of like the way I use ChatGPT. I use it when I'm stuck on helping my kids with their homework. There's certain math concepts that are foreign to me now because I'm so out of touch with it.
Yeah.
It's 99.9% right most of the time, but there are things I know they get wrong. Like when I play guitar and I'm trying to look for a particular chord that I'm, like, hey, my finger's here, my finger's here. It gets it 50% of the time, it gets it wrong.
Yeah.
So to your point, it's not perfect, but you know, sure hell's beat, me trying to figure out how to do a derivative or graph a
Yeah.
quadratic equation for my kids and just have ChatGPT show them how to do it. I mean, the productivity bits of it is endless. I mean, as well as I do, we used to wake up in the morning and say, check our emails, check our this, check our that, and we do it ourselves. And now I just say, hey, pick your, LLM. Look at all my Slack messages, look at all my emails and everything. Tell me what are the key things I need to focus on.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
bloody works. It works.
Yeah. What's important for today? And it'll do it. It's like a
Yeah.
a little
Yep.
personal assistant for it. Yeah. It's really good for tasks like those things. As we expand in its usage, it's only going to get better. That's the thing. We're working the bugs out. I've watched it. I looked at the Copilot beta probably 3 years ago when
Yeah.
it first came out, and I was like, "Oh man, this is garbage. It's going to be forever before it catches up."
Yeah.
Yeah, I look at it now, and I couldn't have been more wrong. I've missed some predictions. That was one of my biggest predictions. I did not expect it to take off and go as quickly as what it did.
I think it's great.
Um, it's been interesting to watch people. You know, simple things. You know, it's a symbiotic world. Stack Overflow is dead, right? It's gone. Things I grew up on,
Yeah.
traditional sources of information are gone. Google search. People use GPT for everything. Why would you search Google now?
Yeah.
But GPT relies on Google. So there's some symbiotic relationships between the technologies that as a society I don't think we've realized exist. And by not using some of those tools, you know, it goes back to what I was talking about earlier in some of our previous conversations. You've got this model that was trained on the discussions in Stack Overflow. Those discussions happened over years between people to find the best answers. You don't have that treasure trove of information. How do you make it go forward with the proper information? How do you train it into the future?
Yeah.
It's easy to train on the past. We always get hindsight's 50-50. But the minute you don't have that wealth of hindsight, what do you do?
Yep. Yep. That's interesting. So, we've talked about AI, and you want to kind of continue down this thread a little bit. Given how all the things you just mentioned and everything, um, how are you leveraging AI, or for that matter, how's your team leveraging AI to do its work? How has this changed in the last year or so? What's your value proposition for using AI in terms of developing code and whatnot? And where do you think it's all headed?
Some of the people who adopted it early were unexpected. Some of my better senior guys that I would have expected to lean in on the technology,
Mhm.
they've been doing it so long they did not. You know, I had a couple of them that like guys like that I was really surprised that they didn't lean into it and adopt it quickly.
Yeah,
But they've got a set routine about how they build software, and they're comfortable in that routine, right? They know what they've learned over the years, and they're set.
yeah.
The younger guys have adopted it. You know, I'm a little concerned how quickly they adopted it. Uh, some of my more junior guys, I'm going, you
Uh-huh.
probably need some time in the trenches before you just trust the answer that AI is given.
Yeah,
But everyone has seen benefits for it. The answers that they're giving. I started my year off doing the pattern-based development lunch and learns, and
yeah,
kind of taught, prompting and prompt engineering for learning and using
yeah,
patterns in your software.
yeah.
That has been magnified tenfold. The team has taken that to every level possible. But what I've noticed is the language has changed. People are using software patterns and terminology differently now. I'm hearing strategy pattern was implemented just the other day in
Yeah.
the teams, and they're using AI to understand how to leverage the strategy pattern. They
Okay.
may not understand, the definition of the pattern,
Hmm.
but because they've learned it through the lunch and learns and picked it up on it over time,
Yeah.
they know just enough to say the words, and the AI fills in the gaps. That's what it's doing. AI is bridging the gaps in knowledge. I have a general understanding of something. Now AI is giving me details on how to implement it. Implementation strategy has went through the roof.
Yeah.
My arguments with the PEs today, working with our architecture team,
Hmm.
anytime they propose something, I immediately fact check them with AI.
How do they feel about that? I'm sure they're not too thrilled about that.
They're doing the same thing. I noticed that, like, this is I spoke the other day. I said, hey, if you're not using AI, you're missing out.
Yeah.
And guess what she was using today when we went in there? The difference was we were looking today, set up a meeting. What was it? It was data mover, some of the Apache Beam and the data mover for technologies. It was, do we have a meeting and set up a meeting with a team that's used it before to find out if the features work, or do we simply ask ChatGPT what the feature set is and how to implement it?
Yeah. I mean,
We could ask one question to AI and get the same answer that a 30-minute meeting would have taken.
yeah. I mean, that's truth in so many different ways. I mean, you're in a meeting with your business stakeholders, important stuff is going down, and they say something, and then, one person just says, "Hey, who knows what this is?" And
Yeah.
sure enough, we're all hitting the same place and we found the same content. We're all in the same document. We can see each other looking, reading, and doing
Yes.
the same thing. So it's so amazingly you thought information was accessible in the internet age. this is ridiculous how accessible this is.
There's no excuse for not having information today. There is
Yeah,
nothing you cannot learn about
yeah,
today in a
yeah.
matter of seconds.
I mean,
That's the speed we're at. It's just, and it doesn't just extend there. It's our PMs are using Glean now. Everyone, we anytime we need to find out data, when someone goes, "Oh, we don't have a SME or domain knowledge on how that works,"
yeah,
me like everybody on the team, you hear the buttons clicking, they're going to Glean to look across every document we have to figure out what's the history of, what was put in Confluence 5 years ago about how this feature works, and that
that's
kind
right.
of.
Yeah,
We're getting that information that would have normally taken weeks to disseminate in minutes, and that's the huge thing. It really is a better search tool than anything I could have ever imagined,
yeah,
because it's an intelligent search tool.
yeah. I mean, there was a topic just a couple days ago that I was being asked to go attend and talk to, and I didn't know anything about it because I never really had to. I asked a couple of our peers, and they're like, "We don't know, but we have people who put the pieces together." And I'm like, "I don't have time for that." So, like you said, I just went on Glean, and I got
Mm-hmm.
all the answers I need. And you know,
Yeah.
this is something that permeates not only in our work life, in our home life. I mean, my daughter. I found out all I needed to know about I was okay, sorry, backing up here. My wife wanted me to write a synopsis of my uh, daughter's tennis career. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
she's a junior tennis player for her school.
Yeah.
And I was tired, she was tired, and I just went to ChatGPT. I said, ChatGPT, can you access all the data about my daughter on this match tennis app thing? And then he's like, I sure can. Okay, give me give me a summary. And it
Yeah.
was surprising the type of stuff they were able to not only pull the data but infer from that data.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's really no damn reason that you don't work without it. I mean, it should permeate through all your development processes and like generating code, writing
Yeah.
unit tests, writing you know um uh you know uh automated tests,
Yeah.
doing pull requests, all of the above, right?
Yeah, and it's only getting better. I mean, we look at, we've got Juno and workspaces coming out now that's
Yeah.
completely changing the concept of, a development environment for engineers to where, while it's not perfect today, I can clearly see product engineering being the future of where we're headed
Yeah.
uh, with this kind of technology. That product engineering standpoint to where you just describe what your feature is and then you do the code review. That's the way of tomorrow. That's clearly going to be the path forward. It's just a matter of maturing that technology up.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting, you say all this and maybe you can summarize a little bit in your opinion, what should technologists like ourselves be prepared for, moving forward based on what we've just laid out in terms of what AI is going to do for to our industry.
I mean, there's two ways you've got your half full and your half empty approach to it. Your half empty approach, you need a backup plan. It really is what it is. You better have a side hustle, a side gig, because there may
Yeah.
be a day you're on UBI. That's the reality. You may not may have a seat at the table.
Yeah.
For everyone else, again, it goes back to being that athlete. How do you get picked for the starting team? You
Yeah.
know, how do you get picked first in dodgeball? You've got to be good at it. That's the only answer. It is. We hear about the rat race, but it really is like that. It's if you're not willing to put in 5 more hours than the guy next to you,
Yeah.
um, to study on this. If you, I tell people all the time, if you're going home and playing with your kids every day of the week and you're not studying technology, learning something around this, there is a guy who is. There's someone that's hungrier at the table every time. So you always have to remember that is that capitalist spirit, that American, that drive forward, man. It's really what it is. It's our nation was built on competition, and that hasn't changed even in technology. Um, I grew up in a golden era of technology to where, I went through the 2008 recession. I was like, what recession? What are you talking about, man? Just looks like a bunch of cheap houses for me to buy, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good deals were all over the place. I went through COVID and all of that. And, I worked in the airline industry during COVID where everything was terrible. But for me, it was just a 6 month vacation. It was literally 6 months off of not having to do anything you know, no project work, that kind of thing. I thought that would have been a great thing in my career. I was like, oh man, I always want to take a 6 month vacation. Even
Yeah.
I get bored. Even I get bored pretty quick. That's what I learned. I will never be able to retire, so I don't have to find something else to do if it doesn't work out for me. I'm not an idle hands guy in that sense.
And
So
from that perspective, maybe a couple of quick thoughts on, on this is like, who do you think are going to be the winners and losers in this world of AI? Just kind of quick thoughts on that.
creatives and innovators are going to be empowered the most.
Yeah,
Um, I've never considered myself creative. I'm very good at imitating things that are built, but
yeah,
if you ask me to come up with the entrepreneurial idea myself,
yeah,
that's a big struggle for me. I
yeah,
can imitate, I can show me something and I can build it.
yeah, yeah,
Ask me to create something out of the blue, and that's a much harder task for me.
yeah,
I'm not that creative mindset, but others, artists, painters, those kind of individuals, inventors,
yeah,
those visionaries, this is going to empower them because now you don't need 20 people to do a task. You are those 20 people,
yeah,
right? The barrier to entry cost is much lower now.
yeah,
Game developers, really simple thing like indie developers in gaming, used to be a programmer like myself, you would have to do your own art or you would have to purchase your artwork, all of your Blender scripts and things like that. Now
yeah,
you just ask GPT to give you a Blender script to make whatever you're trying to do,
yeah,
and it does a pretty good job at it. Texturing, modeling, rigging. And you tell it, hey, I want this to work with Unity 3D. It sets up all the scripts for you. So a lot of that workload in that pipeline that used to take multiple people,
yeah.
now if you have the idea, it's going to empower you as long as you're willing to put in the effort to make it work. So it can be empowering for creative individuals.
The creative individuals, innovators, entrepreneurs, they're all going to benefit from this sort of stuff. Um,
Yes.
what about what are your thoughts on who's going to lose out?
Your factory worker programmers. That's who's your. That's I was talking about this today. The programmer really has become your factory worker in America and many other countries, right? It's your blue collar job. It's the equivalent of a factory job. Pays a little better, but it's the same thing. You get in there, you get a story, you produce something, you produce output, right? You put it through the conveyor belt, you build your software, you move on for your day. Those that are not your innovators, they're just your worker bees.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that stand to lose the most because if you're not architecturally minded, if you're not creative, if you're not innovative, if you're just average,
Mhm.
there's not as much need for average anymore. That's going to be the downsizing. That reduction in average when we can build software faster, there's going to be an initial push to produce, but then there's not going to be a need for it as much. It's going to wane off. We see this with contractor layoffs. The offshore market in the U.S. is devastated right now.
Yeah.
Countries like India, the BRIC countries,
Yeah.
they're going to be impacted heavily. Their workforce is, going to have to shift to something else. What happens when, they're heavily dependent on U.S. markets, and now U.S. markets don't have a need for them because we're trying to fill all of our local
Yeah.
workers, that kind of thing. This is what it's doing. You're going to see a lot of these technology centric companies to where it was just producing, not really innovating.
Yeah.
They're going to suffer. There's not that need for production. If all we're doing is automating a task, AI and robotics does it better.
Yeah. Because it feels to me like the way we've represented it, maybe another way to look at it is all the boring, repetitive, remedial type of tasks are going away. So
Yeah.
what it does is it seems to push you towards a world where on the to say it in a positive way, follow your passion.
Hmm.
You can get a lot done if you find that passion.
Yeah.
Um, the flip side of it is, we're probably going to be stressed in some way as a society around how do we deal with people who haven't found that passion and
Yeah.
they just want a regular job and a regular life.
Yeah. Not everybody's an innovator. Not every
Absolutely.
it's a pyramid. You need You need those blocks at the bottom so that one block at the top can sit there. That's really how our society is built. And when there isn't those blocks at the bottom, that pyramid isn't going to be as high. We have to figure out something to supplement it. There has to be some way to fill that gap. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Otherwise, you're going to get a hungry masses. You're going to have a lot of problems on your hands.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, you know, a lot of what I mean, there's a lot of people talking about this sort of stuff, a lot of people who are a lot smarter than make a lot more money than us to talk about it. It's like Stephen Bartlett, the Diaries of a CEO, and
Mm-hmm.
I listen to that a lot, and there's an approach to the way he does it, but you have to understand, like most of these guys are unicorns, right? They had some stroke of genius or some genius you know that made them stand out, and they were at the right time at the right place, and they deserve everything they get out of that. But it's not repeatable and scalable for everybody in
Yeah,
society. So
yeah.
kind of leads me towards that podcaster, this Gary Economics guy. I forgot his last name, but he talks about this stuff a lot, and he's an economist by trade, and he talks
Mm-hmm.
about things that sound a lot like tax the super wealthy, tax their wealth, and what
Mm-hmm.
is effectively going to end up being some version of UBI or universal basic income.
Yeah.
Um, so it's really interesting to see, like, there's going to be some stress on society as a whole in terms of how AI is going to push us to deal with the haves and the have-nots, how to make them more equal. Because we all know that a society is stable once there's a stable middle class, and that's
Mm-hmm.
a problem America's already dealing with, and a lot of countries are already dealing with. Rich are getting richer, and the everybody else
Or
is,
getting poor. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Um, Yeah, so maybe the question is to you is like, you have a kid. I have, I mean, well, you have your kid's much older. Mine's are still in school, but you know,
Mm-hmm.
what should we be telling our children, our future generations about AI? What should we be telling them to do?
I mean, all they can do is embrace and try to understand it.
Mhm.
Um, but even with my own daughter, I'm in the same challenge to where she's not quite sure what she wants to do. Some days she wants to do the environmental law. Sometimes
Yeah,
I it's hard for me to relate to that because I never had that problem. I always knew I was I knew where I was headed, right? I knew what I gravitated to. I knew what my passion was.
yeah,
Um, so to not have that passion, to not have that focus is weird for me. It's much harder for me to relate to. And I would love to tell growing up, I told my daughter, just do what makes you happy. It's fine. Life will be okay.
yeah,
Um, there's still truth to that,
yeah,
but you also have to pay your bills to some way and play the game, in that area.
mm,
Um, so you have to find something that's harder to replace. I'm not sure environmental law was the best choice for trying to get her into because after seeing how easily law and attorneys are replaced with AI, because a lot of it's just understanding knowledge of the legal code, and that's one thing AI does very well is turn large boring documents into quick reads, that kind of thing. So it's there's not a great answer for that question that I have really.
yeah,
That's one of those futures I can't predict because I don't see a perfect outcome. That's the problem. I don't have a great answer because there isn't a great answer. It feels like a two trains colliding at each and running in opposite directions, and they're going to collide. The impact of that collision, our society and technology, when those two things do finally collide in some form, um, I would love to say it's going to be clean and we're going to figure it all out and it's not going to be messy.
yeah,
Most people are reactive, they're not proactive. Our
yeah,
nation, especially, governments are very reactive.
yeah,
Congress is one of the most reactive groups around.
certainly.
It's like that all over the world.
Yeah,
Very few places are actually proactive to this. So I don't really know what to say. We're going to be reacting to it. How well we react to it, I don't know. I watched the fight to get universal health care over the last 20 years in America.
yeah,
Um, I can only imagine what the UBI fight's going to be because this is, healthcare is something that's a little more understandable. I'm going to give you free money for doing nothing. Why?
It's just very against what
It's not
is
capitalist in the least. It's
yeah,
completely opposite of
yeah,
how we were raised.
yeah,
Even for myself, I'm a pretty liberal guy, and I have trouble with it. Going, man, I just don't see how this makes sense. How do we motivate people? How do we get people to do things? I've always got up and came to work because I got a paycheck.
yeah,
It's a different concept. I'm not saying it can't be done. It's just we're not good at change,
yeah.
right? That's our problem. We're not very good with change as a society. When COVID hit, we could not even stay indoors for 2 months.
No, yeah,
We couldn't. Yeah, that was a detrimental thing to our
yeah,
society.
yeah. A lot of other
Yeah.
crazy stuff happened during that time, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes. So I mean, it's how society reacts, and if COVID was any indicator, um, I can't go the glass half full route on that one. Unfortunately, we didn't do so well in COVID. It was a struggle for us,
yeah, I mean,
at
it's.
least in the states.
I mean, yeah, I was gonna say like in the States because we have such a capitalistic, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, point
Yeah.
of life. Like sometimes we even refuse help because we want to show that we can do it on our own, right? That's
Yes.
the American spirit, right? Like
Yeah.
UBI is going to be a challenge, but AI is going to push that, in my opinion, is going to
Yeah.
push the conversation. What I think is, other parts of the world because they have a different mentality about life.
Hmm.
There's certain other countries that are already adopting it to certain different degrees and all that
Yeah.
stuff. They're gonna have an easier time to do that. And the only hope that I have is like as Americans that we see what other countries have done and try to implement when successful, try to implement it for ourselves because I think we gotta really get away from like you're either black or white, you know, it has to be some gray area in between, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe it works like this in Spain, but in America, there's a version of it. Like we can't just say, "Oh, UBI is evil" or
Yeah.
whatever.
We'll,
It can
we'll
work.
have to have some kind of outcome for it. We'll have a solution. How good it is, I
Yeah,
don't know. How happy it is. Even for myself, though, I mean, I've enjoyed a pretty wealthy lifestyle. You've enjoyed a pretty wealthy lifestyle. If you had to give up your Lexus for, $1,200 a month Social Security check, which is equivalent to what it is, how happy are we going to be too? I don't know how well I personally would do on UBI because I have been wealthy. It's giving up that I worked hard for that my whole life. Giving that up would be really
I
difficult.
I
So
don't
I mean, I see them for people growing up in with this for the first time. It's more palatable. If you're a starving 20-year-old with no future, and yeah, the government's going to give you $2,000 a month to just chill and watch Bluey all day. Sure, okay, we can do that. That's going to be easier. Someone such as myself that is driven and motivated, or your CEOs, or all of these other people that are,
you want to do something.
used to, yeah, getting up every day and accomplishing like a purpose driven life. How do we find purpose? How do we find happiness? How do we find accomplishment when those rules are not the same? Are we the ones that will end up doing the programming and keeping the limited high spec fields?
Yeah.
Possibly. But is there enough for everybody? I don't know.
I, the way I look at it is this is I don't know the answer, but I'm two minds about it. One is, if UBI existed, I'd be more inclined to take risks and follow my passion because I know I have a safety net. And I know I have a safety net where I don't have to take a shit job or a job I don't really want. I just go after my passion. I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
my passion is to start a a gym, for people who likes to run, whatever, and I'll follow,
Hmm.
you know, and right now I wouldn't even be able to think about it because there's no safety net. I'm like,
Yeah.
I have to go show up to work and tell my boss that I'm gonna do my kick-ass best because I need the money. And
Yeah.
that's
Got bills to pay.
whereas if I had UBI, I can probably say, you know what, boss, I don't like you today,
Mhm.
so let me just follow my passion. Let me do what I really want to do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can see that being part of it.
On the flip side, though, you know, you said it earlier, are a bunch of lazy people, and there are a lot out there in the world. They're just
Yeah,
going to do this and leech off basically the people who, do
are
it.
doing something. Yeah, yeah.
And
Can our society deal with that though? That's what is the impact of those two groups? Are you going to see a whole different social, grouping come together for this? The people who are lazy versus the non-lazy kind of thing. Is there going to be impact to that? What about inflation? When say assume 80% of our people are on UBI, of a society, you're essentially on a capped index at that point because if you raise prices or change prices, you've now affected 80% of your population's income
yeah,
in
I
an area. So is that more of a socialist policy on, economics there? I
yeah,
don't know.
honestly think I don't care how you label anymore. At a certain point, the
Yeah.
technology pushes to a point where, you know, where the form of market or government really has to adapt to it. I mean, it's kind of like we used to walk around everywhere or have horse carriages. Now we have cars that can go over 200 miles an hour. Easy.
Yeah.
The concept of how our whole neighborhoods are built because of that has significantly changed. You think of like, housing in Europe where they're more ways versus America and China where it's just like expansive freeways and whatnot. And that's just how we kind of have to adapt in
Yeah.
like UBI just has to be a thing that maybe or some version of it that we haven't figured out has
Yeah.
in the influence or
Yeah.
or
I
or
see in like Chinese societies and Asian societies that being more prominent and easier transition. They're more, that's already something that's being thought about. It's the problem with American society is our mentality in the way we do things there. For us to get a handout from the government just is such a negative thing.
yeah,
Whereas in other societies, even my wife coming from, she came from Turkey, which is like medical care here is a complete, you know, unknown to her. She has no concept of how this system could even work, and the fact that I was like, yeah, I've never really been to the doctor until I was, in my 40s because it's expensive and I don't go. But she's like, I used to go 2 or 3 times a year. It was free. You just walk down and go in.
go in, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to say, like, for me, the closest thing that America has come to that, and the only reason why I am a proponent of, more universal healthcare is Kaiser. I grew up in
Yeah.
Connecticut, and one thing that I always knew growing up is like I can walk into any Kaiser, I'll get taken care of. Uh,
Hmm.
what my mom paid and everything, or mom and dad had to pay for it, but it was just like a copay, back
Hmm.
then. And when I had to experience, the PPO and HMO for the first time in working, I was horrified.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to this day, I'm still, you know, I'm a Kaiser family because it feels like that's the closest version America has to universal health care that the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Um,
You just have to make sure there's a Kaiser facility near where you're getting hurt. Don't bleed out in Alabama, essentially.
yep. It's sort of to get back on track a little bit. We talked a little bit about UBI and the AI and how it's going to push that, and all of this is conjecture and whatnot. Let's get to something a little more fun and grounded.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
I want you to tell me tell our audience the story that you told me about how you use AI to help your daughter with a particular predicament she was in about a month ago.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's interesting. So my daughter, she's in college. She's on her last year here, and I rent a little rental house out in an HOA neighborhood for her to kind of stay in there.
Yeah.
Co-signed on it with her,
Yeah.
and everything had been good. And I knew the property management company was not great with it, that kind of thing. But she went to get her move out. The property management company was sold. It was sold to a different property management company in December, and her move out was in February. So in January we start getting ready for this.
Mm.
kind of getting the move out documents, they send us a bill for a little over $6,000 in HOA fees.
Yeah.
To where I'd found out that the previous property management company, um, I guess the HOA had got in a spat with them over the grass type not being zoysia or Bermuda grass. It was just basically weeds in the yard kind
Sure.
of concept there. Just basically it was mud and moss was what that yard was.
Yeah.
Well, that HOA, the previous management company never responded back to the HOA. So the HOA just simply started levying a $50 bill for every day that they didn't respond.
Yep.
Well, a few months later, that's thousands of dollars that they have ran up in the bill, which is interesting that they could even legally do that to begin with. Just say, oh yeah, I'm gonna start charging $50 a day, but sure enough, it's in the contracts. They were in their legal right to do that.
Right.
My daughter called me in tears, crying, I don't have the money for this. What's going on? Why am I having to pay for this? Um, so I thought this was going to be a simple phone call to the new property management company going, hey, there's been some kind of mistake here.
Yeah.
I get on the call on a recorded line, and I'm like, you sent a bill for $6,000 to my daughter, who's a college kid, poor college kid, just trying to get through this,
Yeah.
and you're saying she needs to resod the yard because it's not the proper grass type simply because she rented this house. And the woman on the other line was like, yeah, that's how the contract works. Nonchalantly, cold as day. And there was something clicked inside me at that moment. That was where I was like, all right, I'm going to win this fight.
Yeah.
This is not the way this works.
Yeah.
That's my social justice warrior kicked in because the coldness, the brassness of this property management company, they set me off in what it was. So, and this was when we had just started our AI journey, started working with AI, and I'd
Hmm.
learned to feed documents in, and I'd learned deep research, and I knew how to point the models at certain sites and ground them with information. So I had us ingest the subdivision's HOA documents, the history that I got access to the HOA property management accounts page since they weren't managing it. The HOA manager sent me a link since I was over the house.
Yeah.
I pointed it at the AI and grounded it with that document source.
Yeah.
I took and fed in the original contract document that the property management company had with leasing terms in there.
Yeah.
All this data I fed into the AI, and I started a battle with them. That was absolutely. I picked their document apart, showed them every place in their document where the contract had showed that if there was a problem with the yard, they were supposed to engage a third party. If there was, no modifications to the landscaping could be made. All of this document I was compiling, all of the data that I had kind of put together around their points in failure, sent this over, had it produce a cease and desist letter for me,
Yeah.
printed out this cease and desist letter, sent it by certified mail out to Oklahoma to their home company.
Yeah.
I did the deep research on the previous property owner on the HPC company, the holding company that owned the
Yeah.
property, because it wasn't an individual; it was investor-owned properties
Yeah.
that was managed by a third-party management company. I showed them who the investor was, how many times those investors had been sued, how many times they had lost in court, how many times they won in court. I had every bit of this data on the history of this property, who owned it, where it was traded, how many times it had. I looked across the geo maps from the Google Maps across the different years. I could pull up, here's what the grass color was at this type of day, here's what it was at this point in time. All of this information I compiled. And I sent them a slew of emails around this, right? Thinking, oh, we're going to be done with this. Here's this big bank of evidence. No, no, couple of weeks. It was like middle of February, early to mid February. I get the court case saying because there's a $6,000 hold on from the HOA dispute,
Mhm.
they're not letting my daughter pay her rent because you can't make partial payments. So she couldn't pay the $2,000 a month rent for the property without paying the $6,000 charge
Yeah.
ahead of time.
Yeah.
So then they started eviction proceedings to evict my daughter.
Yeah.
So I learned, so I got my case over here on the wall where I want it. So I went back to GPT. I started vetting all of the documents that I needed to support to the claims court, how to file the claim, produced all of this. Then I vetted one of my buddies who's general counsel. He's a general counsel. So I kind of vetted it with him and said, hey, here's what I'm about to do. Am I doing this right? He's like, yeah, you're spot on. You've
Yeah,
got your entire case laid out,
yeah,
with all the data, with all the evidence, with all the combinations. Even in requesting them, I'd requested 2 years worth of phone recordings from them, got those the proper way, certified through the judge. Just that alone, submitted that all of this evidence up to the magistrate court here in Cobb County. A week later, it was dismissed. They're like, nah, we don't want to mess with this guy. They threw it completely out, got back on the win there. They couldn't produce the recordings. They couldn't produce half the documents I was asking for. I basically do what they did. I asked for them for so much information that I made their life so hard that they just gave up. They were like, all right, we're not going to
yeah.
fight this in court.
Not worth the
Um,
whatever. Yeah.
yeah, did the move out inspection. They said, you know what, we're not going to bother with a move out inspection. Their answer was just please leave. Just go before we have to fight with you more.
So the amazing
Um,
thing out of this is you literally became your daughter's
attorney.
lawyer,
Yes,
attorney
yes. This would have
via
cost me thousands for the
ChatGPT.
attorney. Yeah, that would have been thousands. And GPT was able to draw up all the documents, all the case. It was able to cite cases against that previous property management company where they were sued. I had a folder of evidence ready to go for them. I still have a case pending where, because in the original cease and desist that I sent out,
Yeah,
I told them that any information requests submitted by them would be cost them per diem at $400 an hour. I've still got an $1,800 case going against them where I'm countersuing them for my time because I had sent that cease and desist over electronic mail, which I didn't realize that was actually accredited.
yeah.
But because I had charged them $400 for my hours, and because they forced me to produce the evidence
Okay.
saying that the previous property management company was the one who was in fault,
Yeah,
now they owe me $1,800 for my time because I had told them they requested that information of me of my time,
yeah,
and I'd already made them known my rate
yeah,
for my time.
yeah.
So
Well,
now we'll get to go now in September we'll go back to court again and I'm gonna see if they owe me $1,800 for
so
that.
so I think every one of the people who hear this will probably say, "Hey, man, give me all your prompts that you did to figure this out," or
Yeah.
you've just figured out your side hustle. You're a part-time lawyer.
Yeah. If you want cheap legal services, I can't guarantee it's great, but
Yeah.
it's decent.
No, it's
know?
awesome that I mean, there's a part of me where I wanted you to tell this story because
Yeah.
part of the reason why, we're doing this is, because of the growing inequality of our society, right? It just feels
Yeah.
when, the regular person could stick it to the big brother or the
Yeah.
or the man or whatever you want to call it. It's just they have so much power that corporations have so much power they lord over the individual right now that
Yeah.
needed.
They all the legal power sits with them because again it is very confusing. If I had to read the legal code and figure out the history of these cases and all this,
Yeah,
I would have taken a team of researchers to do that.
yeah, yeah. And the fact that
For me, a
yeah,
little bit of deep research and I was done.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and the lovely thing is like the best part of it was your general counsel friend who's like, yeah, this all looks good.
Yeah, yeah, I did. That was the confidence thing in me
Yeah,
and knowing I was doing it right. I
yeah,
did have a person to lean into that I could just bounce and go, hey, yeah, I just snap him some pictures across and go, hey, does this look right? Am I doing anything wrong? Am I doing anything crazy?
yeah,
That kind of thing. He did talk me off the ledge of trying to sue them for more when I was mad at them,
yeah,
that you can't use the law as your pocketbook kind of thing. You actually have to have some kind of recourse and show that there was some injustice done, that kind of stuff. You can't just sue them for $10,000 because you want to sue them for $10,000, that
right,
kind of stuff. So he did explain a little bit of that to me, but other than that, it was a cakewalk to go through. It really wasn't as scary and painful as it was. And the beautiful thing about AI is because it's kind of back and forth when you're discussing.
yeah,
You can ask questions and it's going to ask you, hey, would you like me to do this? Would you like me to draw up this document for you?
yeah,
Would you like me to edit this? So you just kind of edit it as you go. It's the same thing as I remember from my divorce sitting with the attorney and they would ask me questions, type some things out, make a change, and then we'd go to the next question. They played 20 questions with me to get the final outcome.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
Yeah,
GPT was playing 20 questions with me to get to the final outcome,
yeah,
and that was what we came up with was this document, this case.
yeah,
It's the same thing.
yeah. So I love that story. I'm glad, you have a chance to share it, and hopefully, more people will hear it and kind of feel empowered and emboldened by that. Uh,
Yeah.
Closing up on the AI topic, we've obviously walked through a lot of different things, and we've given a pretty interesting example, where we, found some social justice, and kudos and good on you. Um, but for someone who's listening to this and they're like, oh my goodness, what is this AI stuff? It's so mystical, so magical. I'm learning it for the first time. What's your recommendation to them? Like they've heard it, sounds amazing. How do they dip their toes into it? Where should they get started?
The greatest piece of information we have in the world is YouTube. It's free.
Yeah,
It's on your phone. It's in front of you.
yeah,
You have a channel that will teach you anything from gardening to quantum locking, hydroponics, AI, you name any topic, and you're going to get good information and bad information. And then you have to decide what is the right information.
yeah,
And that's where I would say use YouTube. YouTube is probably one of, again, in my career, if there's been one technology that has defined my career, it's been YouTube. That's where I've got my inspiration. That's where I've got my ideas. I can vet things. I can listen to peers talk about things just like we're doing here today.
yeah, yeah,
That is your answer. If you want information in a real world, like actually real information, not just ads and sales pitches, but just knowledge from everyday people,
yeah,
that's where you go is YouTube because it like, I do my freeze drying business that on the side with my wife. Where
yeah,
did I learn that from and get started from? Where did I learn which freeze dryer to buy? Where did I learn product reviews and these things? I go and I watch, 10, 15 YouTubes. I absorb all the information I can. It's like reading the manual. I read the manual and then I make a decision around it. YouTube is my manual where I can get just enough information to be dangerous and decide do I want to try something or not.
yeah. You know what? I think I'm gonna have a dilemma at hand based on what you just answered, because I always tell my kids, "Hey, get off your iPad and get off YouTube." And now you're telling, the rest of the world, stay more on YouTube. So there's my dilemma.
Again, it's, food is food,
Yes,
sugar is food, candy
yes,
is food.
yes,
We have to eat food.
yes.
Pick your food wisely.
Yeah, pick the right type of YouTube channel.
Yes. Yes.
Uh, I hear you. But it's the kids, they have their particular favorites.
Hmm. They do.
Yeah,
Um, that's the one thing. It doesn't have very good parental.
yeah,
I'm. I don't think it has great parental controls. I haven't had a kid that's had parental controls on it in quite a while. It wasn't a problem when I was growing up
yeah,
with my daughter. But yeah, it's if you could just somehow limit YouTube to just educational content and have a button that says, "Hey, only allow educational content,"
yeah, yeah,
and somehow could get that grouping correct, yeah, you would that's what I would recommend. Just watch that all the time. You'll learn. It's the same thing I did as a kid. I grew up on public broadcasting. Back when there was like three channels, it was all we got because we didn't have cable, right?
yep,
All I watched was this old house where they remodeled houses and built things.
yeah,
That's how I know what everything in a Home Depot does is because I sat for, 10 years of my life in front of that TV, and that's what I watched was these various home improvement and science shows.
yeah,
YouTube is no different.
yeah,
If I watched cartoons every day, I wouldn't be who I am today, right?
yeah.
It wasn't what I chose to watch. It's just simply I didn't have other choices. So
Well,
if there was a way to simply take those choices away and say, here's your options of what you can watch, kids,
yeah.
here's your menu, pick from your menu, but this is your menu, you would have a greater impact, I would suspect. They might not like you as much, but you would at least have a greater impact on what they learned.
So if the product managers and the product owners in YouTube and Google are listening, this is a feature that, if you
Yeah,
pick,
you want to win over every parent in America? Figure out how to
exactly.
make a setting that says educational only, and figure out how to classify educational things. You may have to be careful of some of that. Anatomy falls under education, so you
Yeah.
may end up with some interesting topics
Yeah.
on your channel.
There you go. But it's better than whatever version where my kids are listening to, adult men screaming at
Yeah,
the
yeah,
screen because they're playing video games. And
yeah. That's true. It's probably better than you're getting on Twitch a lot of times. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I wanted to go back a little bit to the UBI conversation. That's something that always fascinated me. I mean, it fascinated me a lot when, it became more of a general public conversation when Andrew Yang was talking about it when in his first presidential run. It was just a very interesting concept because the conversations I was having with a lot of my friends is, you know, the I I'm gonna replace you with a little script is becoming more true and true. And this is even before the um the AI conversation.
yeah.
And then, combine it with the pandemic, you know, the inequality that's has been exacerbated by the pandemic. The rich got richer and the middle class and the rest of the world kind of stayed behind.
Hmm.
And then you have all these movements all over the world, like in Asia or China, they have the, lay flat movement and all that sort of stuff. I'd like to kind of have a conversation with you. We delved into a little bit earlier today when we ran into each other, but
Yeah.
want to get your thoughts and, like you have all these variables that are working against, you know, the society being more equal. Like you have
Hmm.
pandemic, you have AI, everything we've talked about, it's going to make very clear who the winners and losers are in society.
Yeah.
You're, you what do we say to our kids? What do we say to our next generation about how they should be thinking about these sort of things?
As a society, I mean, there's a couple of ways you can look at it. The simpler way is when I go look back at what we had at generations. Me and my wife were talking about this. We use the term Oregon Trail. Oregon Trail in my household is more like a word of white privilege, right? When you're
Okay.
complaining about something like, oh my God, I'm stuck in traffic. It's so hot out today, something like that,
Yeah.
we'll look and go, Oregon Trail.
Okay.
The reason why, my wife had never understood what the Oregon Trail was in the US.
Okay.
So we watched videos, YouTube again, around Oregon Trail and
Okay.
showed her how many people died, the probability of success. This was what, less than 200 years ago?
Yeah.
That's what life was like. You got on a little wagon, packed all of your food for an 8-month journey
Yeah.
in freezing cold. Most of your kids died of dysentery, and you might have got there to claim your steak for some gold.
Yeah.
That's what we dealt with as a society.
Yeah.
How bad is that relative to today in your standard of living?
Ridiculous. It's not even comparable.
Exactly. Yet we say it's bad.
Yeah.
So is UBI bad, or is it just that we've become very entitled to our standard of luxury and
Yeah.
our standards, right? When we look at what we compared just 200 years ago to what we put up with as a society, what we endured as a society,
Yeah.
it was nothing. We had disease, pestilence, death was common. Living to 50 years was unheard of. That was you were ancient.
Mhm.
Now 80 years is common.
Yeah.
90 years is not really that far off.
Yeah.
And with modern medicine, it's only going to get further and further out we're going to go. We will live longer because of technology.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's a good thing, I don't know, because that only exacerbates the problem of resources and competition. Um, it's a lot easier to have resources when everyone died off at 40. So there's we've doubled. Not only have we doubled our population, we doubled our lifespan, and people don't think about that. That has an impact on resources and competition as well. So as we can we live forever? Should we live forever? Two different questions there.
Mhm.
What is fair, right? Those kind of things. You get into a lot of those societies. So really, it's future generations have to make a decision on what's important to them. What makes you happy? Is it having what you want or wanting what you have?
Yeah.
Right. And if we can understand as a society that I want what I have and to live a more humble, simpler life and to be okay with that, you're not going to have the social stigma and the social impact of losing everything and feeling like you've lost everything.
Hmm.
I noticed it today with my daughter. My daughter shops at Goodwill.
Hmm.
I've never bought a single thing from Goodwill.
Hmm.
So that's telling me I have to go to Goodwill. I'm going to be like, it stinks. It's probably old junk. It's not good.
Yeah.
But she goes and shops there without even thinking about it because it's something her generation does. You know, she's a poor kid, but she's got a recycling holistic attitude to her. So, you know, that's the I'm okay with, you know, recycled. I'm okay with, you know, second and Charles and resale clothing and stuff like that, you
Hmm.
know, to prevent the waste.
Hmm.
Me, it's a little weird to wear someone else's pants. So there's a mentality shift there around our society, and our future generations will have to deal with that. You know,
Yeah.
it really is a mental shift in consumerism. Because you think if you're on UBI and you've got a fixed income and it's less than what we have today, I'm only assuming it's going to be less than what we have today.
Yeah.
You're going to have to be able to do with less. You're going to have to live a more minimalist lifestyle.
Yeah.
There is not enough supply for everyone to live like a Kardashian.
Yeah.
It's just not simply not possible in our society.
Yeah. Because the thing that concerns me that goes back to it is the rich are fine and they will continue to be fine and they will continue to be better and better off. And
Mm-hmm.
and the scraps that are left over for the rest of us is going to get smaller and smaller. And what happens to society when that happens, when it gets to a point where it's like, you know, where it's a breaking point. Like we've seen stuff,
Yeah.
we've seen a breaking point. Luigi, people
Yeah.
love lionizing Luigi, for example, for what he
Yes.
did to the
Yeah.
CEO of that healthcare company. I can't
It's
remember.
an open topic. You talk about it all the time. I've talked about it numerous times. In fact, I made a joke about this at the dentist the other day.
Yeah,
When I went to for my cleaning, they were talking about what was it? One of my X-rays wasn't covered or something because it like the plan. Our plan rolls over in February, not
yeah,
January. I got their
yeah,
X-ray in January, so they
yeah,
didn't pay for it. It's like $60 out of pocket. And my joke was, "Oh, they better look out! I'm gonna call Luigi."
yeah,
No, it's a topic now of
yeah.
is it fair? Because a lot of our society feels who was in the right? Was it Luigi or was it the insurance company? It's a just cause because every one of us has that hatred for, you know, State Farm is one of the most hated companies in the US.
Get their money.
Cigna is one of the more hated companies,
And
you
these are
know.
very profitable companies.
Yes, they are, but profits does not mean that your society won't tear you apart. The
Yeah,
same thing was is with UBI. There is a breaking point. There's a you know French Revolution point here to where when you say let them eat cake,
yeah.
at some point they're going to get tired of eating cake, and they outnumber you. Remember, it's the 1% at the top. The minute that 99% realizes they actually have the power, that's when it becomes dangerous in society. They will that one those who hold power will be eaten alive like we've seen in revolutions prior. Never have they really been that peaceful. Very seldom are they peaceful.
And my own personal vested interest is I don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
Like I am by no means affluent or rich, but I'm not starving, right? So
Yeah.
I'm happy with where I am, and I like to keep things that way.
Yeah.
And what distresses me is when you hear that, other people don't have the hope that we have. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like the election was the most recent election is a reflection of that. A lot of people like you and me were thinking like, yeah, the economy is doing better, but guess what? A lot of
Yeah.
disenfranchised males didn't think so.
Well, they're
Uh,
out of work. They're
out of work.
missing. They can't provide their family. They, you know, they can't. They're not doing well. They can't find a girlfriend. There's all
Yeah.
kinds of things that you know. The young male society of America is in trouble. We're a broken, different society than what I grew up with. There's a lot of hate
Yeah.
and just blame it on video games, blame it on whatever. But there's a lot of anger in that part of our
And
society for whatever reason.
yeah, and I do want to try to get away from that. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, part of the reason why, we're having these conversations and they're having more often is because it's concerning, right?
Yeah.
It's Are so many people feeling that disenfranchised, and what can we do to change that? And that goes back to the concept of if you have a healthy, satiated middle class,
Yeah.
you have a stable society, and we're moving further away from that. And there's pressures like, you know, lying flat movement, AI, pandemic, they're all pushing that in the wrong direction. And that's
Yeah.
that, how do we get back to balance is essentially what I'm, looking for an answer to.
I don't know if we have that answer. I think every world government is trying to figure that out. I used to look at like Sweden and Denmark as model societies, but look at them now. They're
Yeah,
suffering the same problems. They're having immigration issues. Sweden used to be our poster child for a perfect, kind of socialist democratic society.
yeah,
And now the violence, the voting, the problems, it's now it's even infecting in those areas. Germany has swung right. The more protectionism, the everyone is out to get me, no one has my back, I don't feel safe mentality around the world is growing between nations. We
mhm,
saw it started with Brexit. Look at Brexit,
yeah,
saying, oh, Greece
yeah,
is taking too much of our pie. Why are we bailing out Greece? That kind of thing. Um, that 90s society where everything was plentiful, that golden era that we kind of grew up in, that is being replaced by a growing society, an aging society, housing challenges, global supply challenges, um, going back, just the rare earths that everyone is so desperately seeking. 90% of the rare earths for the world is produced in one mine in China.
yeah,
Politics creates problems there, right? There's no, that's one of the biggest challenges. That's what the U.S. is facing. That's why we're looking at Greenland and Ukraine and all these other places, Canada for minerals. We're
yep,
looking to try to find rare earths. I think technology is a solution there. Interesting technology came out just recently using similar to the way we compact diamonds to make synthetic rare earths. We can produce um, iron nitride based rare earth magnets with compression by aligning them and make synthetic magnets to ease some of those supplies. So, is synthetic production the answer? Can we, are we approaching that point to where we're kind of like the Star Trek, where we have the holodeck that just beams up our
yeah,
food, and
wow.
we play on some particles and get that? Is that the right answer to push technology further over the line so that it is the lands of milk and honey to where we just manipulate the particles and produce whatever we need? Possibly.
I mean,
That would be a golden answer for everybody.
you know,
Um,
yeah, I mean, that's the bias I have because, I'm a Silicon Valley, transplant, and I always believe that that's, you push forward technology, you think of every big revolution that's happened in human civilization has always been any leap in technology that was forward had created a lot of wealth and equality for everybody, right? Because
yeah,
the first time we figure this type of stuff out, you never get it right the first time, and the way you make up for that is manpower,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like you think about how we built a car first. It's like it used to be with a lot of humans. Now it's all robotics, right?
Yeah, yeah. Steam engines changed everything. What is it? The story of Casey Jones. I don't know if you know that one from the railroad. He was a guy that
I don't know this one. Yeah.
Casey Jones was a famous American story out west to where he was back in the day when they were building the railroads. It was driving the iron spikes. You
Oh yeah,
swung a
yeah.
big sledgehammer
Yeah,
and drove them in there.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
he raced. Casey Jones was the guy who raced the steam engine, and I think he died trying, like, to drive more nails than the steam engine.
Okay.
And
Okay.
in that's kind of where I feel like we are now. It's like I'm the Casey Jones, and AI is more the steam engine kind of thing. Is
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
I mean,
Um,
it feels
I
like
don't
at
know
the
how
end.
we overcome some of that. That's some of the challenges of it. It is. I almost go back to the Fermi paradox. I don't know if you're familiar with the Fermi paradox, the in
Explain it for our
evolutionary.
audience. Yeah.
Huh?
Extreme.
In Fermi paradox, you have various steps throughout societies to where you either pass this gate or you fail.
Yeah.
This is the, advanced civilizations versus non-advanced civilizations. They fail. Why? They consume all the resources and die on their planet, all these kind of things.
Yeah.
Is AI one of our Fermi paradoxes? Is this really truly one of the stepping stones that defines, does our society succeed and evolve to the next level?
It
And
feels like it. A lot of experts
or
believe that.
do we not? That's the, and maybe the answer is we don't. That may be the outcome. We've existed on this planet for billions of years, and in the last 4,000, we've went from Bronze Age to AI. Why
Yeah.
have we not done that 500,000 other times in the billions of years that we've been around?
Yeah.
Or have we? I don't know. That's the kind of stuff I think about. That's what I look at is you know, how many times have we done this game? And just, the time span is there. How many times have we reset ourselves?
Yeah,
These kind of things.
we're in the Matrix, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's not even about Matrix things. It's, you look at something that always goes back to and if you look at the Sea of Japan and off the Sea of Japan, running from there down through the Polynesian islands, there's roads that are underwater, ancient civilizations, cities
Yeah.
that are underwater.
Yeah.
They were above ground at one point. People were there.
Yeah.
The heads on Easter Island, all the heads that,
Yeah.
you've got the head sticking up, but lo and behold, you dig them out 4 or 5 feet below ground. There's the full body. The
Yeah.
Sphinx in Egypt. Why is half of it buried and half of it was above ground? Obviously some things have been around for a while and we've seen things in our society, right?
Yeah.
So I look at this and go, is this just another test? And if we don't pass, we go back to being cavemen and start all over again,
Okay.
repeat the cycle. I don't know. Does society rip itself apart because we're hungry and we have nuclear weapons and all this stuff? Who knows? That's the challenge. It does feel like this is a test. This is going to be one of the harder tests. I thought it was going to be global warming. I really did think global warming was going to be the biggest challenge we
Yeah.
deal with.
Yeah.
Seeing what AI is doing to our society or could potentially do for or to our society,
Yeah.
that one seems like a bigger dice roll than anything else I've ever experienced. It's going to change our society. It could potentially reset our society. It could potentially catapult our society into the great beyond, Mars and beyond, whatever it is. Is that the expansion? Is that now we expand beyond the planet for resources and those kind of things? There's a lot of options that come from this stuff. It's just so unpredictable. There isn't a way to predict it because we're dealing with humans. Much like the hallucinations in AI, it will give us an answer. We will have an answer as a society. Will it be the right answer? I don't know.
Yeah. So you made it all the way to the end. That probably means you like what we had to say. Thank you so much. Please remember to like and subscribe so we can continue to bring you more of this content. See you later, folks. Sorry, and too bad I didn't record any of that. So I could have made it into the blooper reels.
Yeah.